Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and on today's video we're taking a look at the Thermalright ARGB and Fan Hub X8. A very imaginative part number. This is actually really useful, so if you're somebody like myself that likes to have a lot of RGB in your computer and you've got multiple fans, as is the trend these days to have more than 3-4 fans, then this is going to be really useful to you, especially if you've got a motherboard that doesn't have a particularly high amount of PWM connectors on the motherboard. So this will allow you to connect up at least a minimum of 8 PWM fans and also 8 ARGB headers. So this means you can spread your RGB out across your system without worrying about blowing the headers on your motherboard. Now, if you're daisy chaining from your motherboard, which is generally okay-ish, if you're doing maybe 3 or 4 fans, maybe a couple of ARGB devices, that's absolutely fine. But if you're using a lot of ARGB and lots of fans, it does put an incredible strain on your motherboard. So it's a really good idea to pick up something like this, which is SATA powered. So you can use a power plug from your power supply, plug in the SATA, the power is then distributed through this little box through to all of your fans and addressable RGB devices. Another reason why this is actually a particularly good buy is the fact that it's very, very cheap. Now, Thermalright, as you probably know already, do some really good stuff and at very good prices. And this is no exception. So essentially, it's £1 a port. This is currently on Amazon here in the UK for £7.90 for Prime members. Normal price on this, £9.99, so it's not really going to stretch your budget, but will give you a little bit more flexibility. And again, especially if you've got a motherboard which maybe has only one addressable RGB port and maybe a couple of fan headers, this is going to make life so much easier and also easier for cable management. So let's take a look at the packaging, what we get inside, and then I'll explain how it's all connected up and some pros and cons and things that you should definitely look out for. So first of all, the packaging, as you can see, ARGB and Fan Hub X8, pretty basic packaging, and on the back it goes through some of the specifications. Tells you that it's a PWM hub. Now this doesn't work with 3-pin fans, so if you have got 3-pin fans or you're thinking maybe you want to plug in your AIO pump to this, essentially it's not going to work. It'll just run at 100%. So if you don't mind your fans running at 100% or your pump running at 100%, this is okay, but it's not really designed to do that. Opening up the packaging, actually quite a handy little thing they've done. They've actually put the instructions printed on the box itself, so not wasting paper. And it's got the instruction there that tells you basically how everything goes together and what to connect where. So inside the box we get the hub itself, which actually I think looks really nice. We'll check out the ports on that very shortly. You also get 2 cables included, as you'd expect, one of which being the PWM. So that's a 4-pin PWM. Now some of you have probably noticed, if you're eagle-eyed, that only 3 of the actual pins are wired on both ends. And that's because the power itself comes from here, and also the PWM signal and all that kind of stuff, that is the only ones we're interested in, so it only needs to have 3 wired. That doesn't mean it's compatible with 3-pin fans, it just means that they didn't have to wire an additional pin on there, saving a little bit of money. When it comes to the addressable RGB side of things, as long as you've got a standard addressable RGB header, a male one, this has got female ends, both ends, so that is your traditional 5-volt 3-pin addressable RGB header. For those of you that are wondering, both of these cables come in a length of 50 centimeters. Also included is a double-sided sticky tape, like a pad. So depending where you're going to put this in your PC, but sadly it doesn't have any magnets in it, which would have been nice to be able to magnetize it to the back of your PC chassis. But it does come with this sticky pad, so you can adhese it to the back of your system somewhere. Or alternatively, if you've got a system which is a little bit more on the narrow side, then you can just stick this into one of your hard drive bays. When it comes to the actual dimensions of the unit, which I think for some people is going to be actually quite important, if you've got a slightly slimmer chassis, then we're looking at a length of 14 centimeters or 5.5 inches, a width of 63 millimeters or 2.5 inches, and a depth of 15 millimeters, which is around about 5/8 of an inch. If you're going to be using the adhesive pad as well, which is going to add a little bit, and maybe add on about a 1/16 of an inch. So now let's take a look at the actual connections and where they go. So we'll start off with the power. So this is SATA powered, as we've said already. So there is a SATA plug on this end. And actually, if you're wondering where the plugs go, you're not entirely sure, it's not entirely obvious, then actually on the back it is printed in, kind of embossed into the plastics, exactly what goes where. Unfortunately, it isn't on the other side, but I think it's relatively straightforward. So SATA power on this end. On this side, this is the kind of primary side. You'll notice there is a red coloured header there. Now this is the most important one on the actual entire device. So this is what they call the sense pin. So whatever you plug into this particular header in terms of PWM is going to be what is replicated across the rest. So this is not a controller, this is a fan hub or a splitter. So essentially what is going to happen is the signal which is going into this port here, fan wise. So if you've got a fan which has got an RPM range between 600 and maybe 1600 RPM, the rest of the fans will all try to replicate that particular PWM signal. If you're using different size of fans, then they are going to act slightly differently. So a 12 centimeter fan is going to work differently from a 14 centimeter fan. So ideally, you want to make sure that all the other fans which are connected to this hub are actually of a similar specification, or ideally exactly the same. So essentially, when you're wiring things up, if you're only using just one, just plug in with the red one. When it comes to the addressable RGB ones, the 5-volt 3-pin, you can plug those in anywhere, it doesn't matter, because this is literally just replicating the signal which is coming in as the input. On the other side, we've just got more ports, so you've got 4 fans and 4 addressable RGBs on each side. And on the far side, then we've got another 2 connectors. So these are your inputs. Now these are going to come from either a separate controller, your motherboard, or maybe if you've got a case which has got fan and addressable RGB controls, then you can use those. So using the 2 cables which are included, you've probably seen this from some B-roll, which I did a little bit earlier. So the addressable RGB plugs into this port here on the end, and then the other end is going to go directly into your controller or your motherboard. From the video you're probably seeing this go into the addressable RGB header on our MSI motherboard. But of course, you can replicate any addressable RGB signal. Maybe it's coming from a hub inside of a case. Your choice entirely. It just has to be a 3-pin 5-volt addressable RGB signal. Now when it comes to the fan input or the connection to your motherboard, this is the PWM. So this just goes into the port next to it. So then you've got both of these going to your motherboard or controller, whatever you want to do. So this is going to be where you decide how you want to control your fans. So if you want to control your fans, including the CPU fan, actually on your CPU, the CPU cooler, radiators, whatever it may be, then plug this into the CPU header. If you want to use this as a fan header to control the fans on your case, but you don't want it to be interrupted by what is going on with the CPU, then alternatively plug this into one of the fan headers on your motherboard. One stipulation is that the header that you plug it into on the motherboard, you must go into the BIOS and make sure that it's set deliberately to PWM control, not DC control. If you have it on DC control, all of your fans will run at 100% because it has no idea what to do with a DC signal. It's only designed to be used with a PWM signal, which is very different. For those of you that are interested, what you can actually put onto the fan headers in terms of amperage. So these will support up to 1 amp. So that should be enough for pretty much every fan on the market, possibly a couple if you're daisy chaining them. Again, because this is a relatively inexpensive device, if you want to daisy chain more than that and kind of push your luck a little bit on the individual headers, it's not going to be the end of the world. Worst case scenario, you're likely to burn out the actual hub itself. If we take a look actually inside, take it apart, you can see, although yes, it's pretty well made and everything looks to be okay, you will find potentially on these there are some kind of production issues. On this specific one, I did notice that one of the PWM fan headers was actually slightly bent and misaligned. So if you're getting to a point where you're setting this up in your PC for the first time, or after using it for a while, just make sure that all the pins are absolutely straight. It won't hurt to actually get something in there to bend them straight should you need to. So overall, I think this is a very cool device, and again, because it is Thermalright, it's generally going to be pretty inexpensive. Regardless of where you are in the world, they do seem to have some pretty keen pricing. Also, we've done other versions of this in the past. If you want to check out reviews of other ones and see what my thoughts are on those, we've done ones from Arctic, we've also done one from Ergo, and various others, which we'll try and link in the video description so you can check out other alternatives. But at the time of recording, at April 2024, this I think is pretty much the best bang per buck on the market. Just do be aware, there isn't a controller built into this at all, so if you don't have any addressable RGB inputs that you can take from either your motherboard or your case, this isn't going to do what you need it to. It won't provide any addressable RGB information to the fans whatsoever, so just make sure that you have a system or a plug that you can plug it into to get that lighting out. In terms of fan control, if you don't want to use the ARGB, you're not an ARGB fan, you can just use this as a fan hub. You don't have to have the addressable RGB connected, so potentially there's that as well. And also, you can use it just as an addressable RGB hub and connect your fans directly to your motherboard. It's really flexible in that regard, but essentially this is effectively a splitter or hub just to distribute a specific signal to multiple devices. So there you go, that has been the Thermalright ARGB and Fan Hub x8. Hopefully you've enjoyed this review. If you have, smash that like button. If you want to see more content of this on a daily basis, maybe consider hitting subscribe and the chime notification. That way you'll be notified of future video releases. But for now, I've been Mike. This is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.